It is midsummer and it's the longest day of the year. And if you think that that just means sunburns and overpriced strawberry festivals, well, not in Tudor England. The Tudors didn't do anything halfway, especially not something that combined religion, fire, community feasting, and the occasional flaming serpent. Today, we are going to dive into how the Tudors celebrated the summer solstice, complete with bonfires, magical herbs, and more than a few tipsy devils on stilts. For the Tudors, the turning of the seasons wasn't just a poetic metaphor, it was how life worked. Time was measured not by clocks or by Google Calendar notifications, but by planting, by growing, by harvesting, and resting. Midsummer, the summer solstice, came at a natural pause. Crops had been planted, the days were at their longest. People had a moment to breathe before the harvest madness began. It was a time to feast, to gather, and to set things on fire for good luck. And, as we'll see, to mix a bit of pagan mischief with Christian formality. Let's get into it. Happy summer solstice, friends. So before Christianity arrived on the scene with its saints and feast days, midsummer had already been a moment of enormous spiritual importance across pagan Europe. We know that they were marking the sun's peak power at Stonehenge, for example. This was the time when the sun was at its highest. It was a time of growth, of abundance, of fertility. Naturally, people lit fires, they danced, they feasted, they did everything they could do to encourage the sun to stick around just a little bit longer. The early church, ever the savvy marketer, didn't ban these celebrations outright. Instead, they rebranded them. June 24th became the Feast of St. John the Baptist, neatly tucked just a few days after the solstice. Now you could still have your midsummer party, but it was for St. John. The wild revels didn't stop, they just came with a new name tag. This clever repurposing was the same playbook used with Easter, which, fun fact, gets its name from Oster, the Germanic fertility goddess. So by the Tudor period, midsummer was this glorious hybrid of old and new, officially religious, unofficially still very much about fire, flowers, and fun. Before we get to midsummer, the summer season in Tudor England had already kicked off with Corpus Christi, a celebration that took place on the Thursday after the 8th Sunday after Easter, which, yes, is about as specific as Tudor dating can ever get. Corpus Christi had royal backing from the Pope as far back as 1317 and was meant to remind people of the holiness of the Eucharist. But in practice, it was a pageant lover's dream. Towns competed for the most extravagant processions. Floats, clergy, banners, music, biblical plays all performed in the streets. In York, the consecrated host was carried in a silver and crystal vessel under a protective canopy. In Coventry, they embroidered velvet banners with golden thread. The London Skinners Company pulled out all the stops with more than 200 clergy in their procession. The York cycle of mystery plays included 52 scenes and would have taken over 21 hours to perform in full. That is, assuming that the audience had the stamina and a packed lunch. But all of this grandeur couldn't survive the Reformation. As Protestant reformers cracked down on what they saw as popish spectacle, Corpus Christi processions began to vanish, and by the 1570s, they were gone, party poopers. Still, midsummer survived a little bit longer. And that brings us to one of the most iconic features of the Tudor summer season, the bonfire. Now, nothing says happy solstice like lighting things on fire, am I right? Bonfires were the center of midsummer festivities. They were built on sunset on the eve of St. John's Day, burning late into the night. And they weren't just decorative, people believed they were medicinal. So you see, while the Tudors had no concept of germs as we do, they did understand that bad smells and bad air, miasma, seemed to accompany disease. And of course, the summer is when disease would be at its height with the plague returning. So they lit fires to purify the air, especially hoping that the smoke would drift over the fields to protect the crops. Some even positioned the bonfires specifically to catch the breeze and to blow smoke where it was most needed. And then there were the bones. Yes, literal bones. The word bonfire actually may come from the word bonefire, a reference to the custom of throwing old animal bones into the flames. This was supposed to ward off evil, scare away dragons, naturally, and bring good luck. One 15th century monk grumbled about the practice, claiming it made the whole town stink, which, fair enough. John Stowe, the chronicler of all things London, remembered the bonfires fondly, writing decades later with a hint of nostalgia. He described the entire neighborhoods getting wood, setting tables outside their homes with cakes and ale, and inviting friends and strangers to feast together. In his words, it was a time of great familiarity, where even enemies reconciled over sweet bread and good drink. You could call it the Tudor version of a block party if your block included bones and plague smoke and very real life hazards. Now, if you're thinking that the bonfires were intense, just wait for the marching witches. These were elaborate nighttime processions held in places like London where up to 4,000 people might take part. Picture it. Morris dancers jingling, hobby horses prancing, people on stilts towering over the crowds. There were pageants, music, fireworks, and the occasional terrifying monster. Yes, literal monsters. In 1521, one midsummer parade included a massive float of Pluto, god of the underworld, featuring a serpent that spat fireballs into the crowd. What could possibly go wrong with that? The Lord Mayor's Guild in London went all out. That year, 1521, they staged 5 major pageants: the Castle of War, the Tree of Jesse, St. John the Evangelist, St. George, and, of course, Pluto. Some of these had clear religious roots, but others, not so much. One float included naked boys dyed black to represent devils, and let's just say that Osha was definitely not there, had no presence. Sometimes they even set dragons on fire. The Drapers Guild once paraded a dragon doused in aquavitae, essentially early brandy, and then lit it up. Health and safety nightmares aside, it was all about creating spectacle. And in the days before Netflix, fire-breathing serpents were peak entertainment. Though these events weren't technically religious, they still came under scrutiny. Authorities worried about riots, especially in tense political times. And by the mid-16th century, even the watch marches began to disappear. Henry VIII banned them in 1539 to save money, though no one really believed that was the only reason. A few years later, Lord Protector Somerset tried to revive them after banning the Corpus Christi festivities, but it was a short-lived comeback. Even Elizabeth I, who adored pageantry, couldn't bring them back for good. She tried to get the Lord Mayor of London to revive the Midsummer Watch, but the city politely declined. It was probably just too expensive and too flammable. But Midsummer wasn't just about pageantry and fire, it was also about magic. This was seen as one of the most powerful nights of the year for supernatural activity. The hours between dusk and dawn were especially potent, the time when the boundary between the worlds blurred, and witches, fairies, and spirits were the most active. Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream captures this energy perfectly, with Puck, also known as Robin Goodfellow, darting around causing mischief. The character of Puck has deep roots in English folklore. Originally called Puka, he was a trickster, part sun god, part spirit of chaos. Depending on who you asked, he could bless your crops or steal your socks, or maybe both. People believed that the witches harvested their magical plants at midsummer when the sun gave the herbs their greatest power. One popular plant was St. John's wort, which had little red flecks thought to symbolize the blood of the saint. It was worn in wreaths and hung in stables to protect animals from evil spirits. Then there were the fern spores, gathered at midnight on Midsummer's Eve, supposedly capable of granting invisibility. Not even metaphorical invisibility, but literal cloak of invisibility style vanishing. You had to catch the spores at just the right moment as the fern released them into the dark. If you did, you might never be seen again, which, depending on your social calendar, could be a blessing. Aside from the fire and the magic, midsummer was deeply connected to the natural world. People decorated their homes with flowers and greenery, especially circular garlands, symbolizing the endless cycle of the seasons. Yellow, orange, and red flowers were especially popular, the colors of the sun. Birch branches, fennel, trefoil, and white lilies were commonly used. And according to John Stowe, every door was shadowed with green birch, long fennel, St. John's wort, white lilies, and such like. Some herbs had spiritual meaning. Trefoil with its three-part leaves symbolized the Trinity, and Madonna lilies were associated with the Virgin Mary. Cattle were crowned with wreaths of St. John's wort, and animal pens were decorated to protect them. It was believed that the herbs picked at midsummer were more powerful for medicine and for magic. So this was a prime time for making remedies and charms and the occasional love potion. And yes, divinations for love were especially popular. Young people might place their herbs under their pillows or try midsummer rituals to reveal the face of their future spouse. One imagines that a few just might have used the occasion to, sneak off into the woods. So, what did midsummer mean to the Tudors? It meant bonfires in the streets, dragons in flames, mischievous spirits in hedgerows, and herbs gathered by moonlight. It was a time for healing, for magic, for reconciliation, and yes, some very good parties. And while most of us aren't going to start rolling flaming cartwheels down the hills or dyeing children to look like demons, please don't do that. You can bring a little bit of Tudor midsummer spirit into your day. Light a candle, go gather some sun-colored flowers, make a toast to the longest day of the year. And if there's someone that you've been meaning to make peace with, maybe midsummer is the perfect time to do that. Whatever you do, please keep your dragons away from the brandy. Happy midsummer, my friend. So, how are you celebrating midsummer? We are going to make a fire in the fire pit tonight, and I got stuff to make s'mores, so that's what we're going to do for midsummer. What are you going to do? I would love to know. Tell me in the comments, please. If you made it this far in the video and you liked it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. You know what it does. It feeds the algorithm and gets our content to even more people. I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out videos like this on the regular. If you want to keep watching videos about Tudor seasonal customs, here's one on how the Tudors prepared for autumn. If you're already ready for pumpkin spice, you could check that out. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. Thanks so much for being here. Remember, you are deeply loved. I am so glad that I shared the planet with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll be back soon. In the meantime, don't forget to drink your water. All right, friend. Bye-bye.